everybody, we're back here with the man you all know and most of us remember from our childhood or my late teenage, young adult years, since I was a little older. The man himself, David Eckhard, otherwise affectionately known as Chippy or Chipmunk. How you doing, David?
I'm doing all right. Enjoying PanZ in this wonderful COVID moment.
Awesome.
All right,
Nice thing y'all got going on today.
Yeah, we've having a lot of fun with it. It's being very successful. I was checking the donation list here, and there's been quite a few people who have donated so far on here. So
thank you to all our donors.
yeah, here in a little bit we'll go over them because it looks like it's all mostly people signing up for the Fresco Memorial Tournament tomorrow. So okay, let's I lost my questions for you, Chippy. So well, I remember the first one right off the hand. How did you become a Score employee? What was that like?
Okay, so in the very beginning, I was part of one of the two original playtest groups for the original version of the Dragon Ball Z game. There was a group of us here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas, because one of our friends was the son of one of the project managers. And there was also another group of people up in like Michigan or Wisconsin, wherever Jim Ward is at. So we were a part of that initial group that play tested with little pieces of paper glued onto cardboard. And then when the game launched, they needed customer service because there were so many people sending in questions on how to play the game. And that's how I got in. Because who better to answer customer service questions than people that have already played it a ton.
Okay, so I'm going to flash you back to memory lane. I went and found these earlier, and I want to ask you some questions. Do you know what these are?
Those are some of the very original playtest cards. Those were the ones that we used to play the game.
Okay, so I have some questions about a few of these. There's a particular card known as the Brown Lifting Drill on here.
I think
this one right
Brown
here
style was the only piece of advice they took from our playtest. We had a lot of advice on how to clean up the game, but the hoop style was the only thing they apparently paid attention to. But yeah, those were all Jim's initial idea for launching the game, card titles and all.
Okay. So I've got another one on here I want to ask you about. So a lot of the stuff on here, I don't know if you remember this, and I want to know if you play tested this. This card has the text to be spoken in a confident, amused way. I think they were waiting for us, I'm sure of it. Your power level was miscounted and it goes to full power. So when you played that card, did you play it in a confident and amused way?
I don't remember doing that ever, but I mean that shows the style of the very original designer of the Dragon Ball Z game, which is Sir Jim Ward. And for those that don't know, in hobby nerd lore, you know, you had Gary Gygax, the creator of Dungeons and Dragons. Jim Ward was one of the original players that sat at his table. He's credited for making the first science fiction role-playing game and whatnot. So he's a very role-playing centered person. In his mind, it's all about like picking up a role and play. He don't know much about card games at all, as shown with his first work, Spellfire.
I forgot that he worked on Spellfire.
Yeah, Spellfire was his first TCG. And so the proper trading card game ideals just doesn't sit in his head. But role-playing stuff does. That's why, like, Saiyan Saga was like, the Earth heals you for 2 life cards, and how there were like 4 to 5 different words for the word block, because he was more about playing people and playing a role in more role-playing minded than trading card game minded.
Okay.
So That playtesting card's a perfect example.
Even though in the Saiyan Saga rulebook, there's actually a section that says, "Do not act out the cards, or everybody loses."
Yeah. We got tons of cards about beating people up, so we
Inflicting
don't
3
get
life
in
cards.
trouble with kids beating each other up because of our card game. Yeah.
Did you ever receive a customer service complaint about someone acting out a card in a physical way?
No, but I may have seen it a few times at a couple of conventions.
Okay. So, a lot of your time at Score was documented in the piece you wrote for Retro under your anthologies. Unfortunately, the first half of that I've never been able to recover. So only 3 out of the 4 pieces of that still exist on the site. So if anybody wants to read a big manifesto on Chippy's time to Score, it is out there. So we're not going to spend a ton of time kind of on that. But do you have any fond memories from your times there at Score? Like anything that really stands out from that Z era, whether it be a playtester or the guy with the actual first world champion or anything like that?
I miss the people in the interactions. I don't miss the company itself that much, but the family that we had put together, and all of its crazy mutations and branches, it was really fun, and I miss a lot of those people. Probably the one event that sticks out in my mind the most, as far as, hey, I made it, quote unquote, was the thing with King Brawley at that one World Championship.
You're going to have to narrow it down, because I feel as though there were more than one of those things.
I feel like I'm thinking of the wrong incident.
He was one of my favorite players just because he was a character in real life. I just loved his personality and who he was. And he got very emotionally attached to the game. And he was one of those average to above average players, not top tier, but still decently good. But just kept missing top cuts. And one year, I don't even necessarily remember what happened, but he made some type of misplay in his game, and he needed to win that match in order to make it to top cut finally. And if he lost, he'd miss out. And he got so emotionally invested in the misplay that he saw himself make that he repeatedly bashed his head against the table until he hyperventilated and needed to be taken out on a wheelchair.
That actually sounds like something that would happen in an episode of Dragon Ball Z.
Do you remember who his opponent was?
Like that moment was just, he was so invested in something that I spent so much time and effort and work into that if I could name at least one person that this game affected. so that one event sticks out in my head the most.
Yeah, I actually believe his opponent in that match was our dear Fresco.
That's what. Yeah, I think you were correct. I think you're correct. I think it was Fresco. Yeah.
Because I didn't witness it fully happening because I was in the middle of doing some crazy judge ruling for some other match. It was more I turned around once the ambulance people got there and started hoisting them away, and they had to start moving tables to get to them.
Yeah, I remember when everything got, because I was a participant in that event, I remember when everything got delayed. I shouldn't laugh, it's not funny, but...
Well, yeah, not that specific thing, but it was kind of a Score thing. I don't think we had a single event that went off without a hitch. There was always a hitch.
Yeah. Yeah, so before we get into a little bit more Z stuff, I'm going to take us on a detour here. I know you designed Yu Hakusho, and in my mind I thought that was the second game you had designed, but I'm being reminded by Mr. Giddings in the chat that you worked on Buffy.
Yes, Buffy came before Yu Hakusho.
Yeah, so let's talk about what was were you the main guy on Buffy? What was the deal with Buffy?
Yes and no. So I don't remember. I don't think I ever necessarily was told the full details, but we actually bought the original core version of the Buffy game engine from a pair of guys named Christian and Owen from I think the company was called Last Unicorn Games. They had done the Dune trading card game.
Oh wow, I remember that game.
They had gotten Chaz's ear, and I don't necessarily know how, but we bought this game engine, and they basically gave it to me and was like, you got to use this in some way. We trust you to change up whatever you want to change up, but it's got to resemble something like what they gave us because we paid for it.
Lovely, yeah.
So,
I remember, Chippy, both you and me ended up getting banned from Joyride games because of the Full Metal Alchemist game, which really borrowed very heavily from Buffy, and I remember you calling that out, and they put you on the ban list, so that I'm like, I'm going to avenge Chippy on the forums, and then I got a lifetime ban on Full Metal Alchemist, because I found like a broken infinite combo, and I'm just like, I'm going to the next tournament with this ban hammer.
Well, in the end of the day, imitation is the biggest form of flattery. But it wasn't just Buffy that game kind of borrowed from. I think Kunkel put together this huge list of game mechanics where it's like, that's Buffy, that's from Yu, that's from Dragon Ball Z.
I do remember he created like a whole document about how that game borrowed heavily from like score mechanics in particular.
Yeah.
Over across the board. And I think that was the start, because Kunkel, I believe, implemented a program where all the playtesters at the time were supposed to play other people's games. Because I remember when you were there, and it was like that kind of when I first got there. They didn't want us to play anybody else's games. They wanted like no outside influence. Don't even go play Pokemon on the weekend. Don't play anything.
Well, two sides of that coin. They were a bit protective of us as far as like people giving us ideas and then being afraid of us using them and then getting sued because we use their stuff.
Better like create a card on the forums.
But as far as the playing in tournaments and investing stuff, that was more perspective thing. Like the leadership at the time was more, hey, if we're playing our competitors' games, that's showing that during our free time we like playing their stuff more than we like playing our own. And with some stuff that happened with one of our tournament organizers at the time, that kind of gave us the blanket ban until Stephen Juddy came around.
Yeah, because
he was in charge. They let open those floodgates, and that's why I played in the Versus Circuit Pro Tour that year.
Yeah, so did I. Because I remember we all got Juddy into playing Magic the Gathering, and that allowed us to pretty much play. Like I remember we all played Versus. We were all playing Versus on that Pro Tour that first year it came out.
Yeah.
Wow.
Juddy was really impactful for how he came to be how it was as far as a collectability standpoint. Because he was a baseball card guy, and the spot had opened up, and they needed a place to put him somewhere because they had to like shrink their numbers in the card designers or something, and so it was going to be temporary. So he didn't know much about trading card games, but he knew about trading cards. So ideas like the multiple foil sets and the change in the amount of cards per rarity and whatnot, like those were all his ideas in order to make things super collectible.
Yeah, because I know that the foil thing on those later couple of UU sets got pretty out there. Like, I'm fairly positive, like those last couple of UU sets, the rarest rarity, I was like, I think Kunkel and I did the numbers one day, and we're like, I don't actually think it's possible to pull a full set of that. Because based on the rarity, I don't think they would actually, enough of them would go into collation in the printed product for some of those sets to even be completed.
Well, if it got on a sheet, it got printed. But you're right as far as the overall total amount.
Yeah. But it has been pointed out in the chat too. I think you remember this because you were around too, and I think we were all guilty of this. That they did not want us to wear other companies' gaming shirts in the office. And it all came from us playing Versus, so we all had like Spider-Man and Doctor Doom and Versus shirts, and they were like, don't wear the competitor shirts to work, guys.
Yeah. It especially didn't look well because, most of the building we worked in was basically one big long Walmart hallway with tons of half-size cubicles, so everybody could see each other from across the building.
Well,
So wearing something loud.
yeah. Did you ever have to work in the war room, or were you always a cubicle man?
We got to work in the war room a lot. Anytime I did any of the image capturing and image selection stuff, that was in the war room. A good deal of our playtesting was done in the war room because we would be loud while playing. And
You're
in
really
that
acting
big
out
massive
the
hallway, that would disturb everybody. So they're like, can you just go to that back room? Go play your kids' games. So it spent a good deal of time there. But as I guess more moved up into more of a pure designing position, the less amount of time I ended up spending in war.
Okay.
Outside of image capturing stuff, all the image stuff.
Do you have a favorite DBZ card? One that's special to you in your heart that you did?
That's really hard to say.
Or maybe just a set.
Once you get past like 1,000 to 2,000 cards, like they all start melding together.
Yeah.
I'm particularly fond of the Ultimate Champion card that Dustin Morabito won. Big fan of that
We're getting
card.
some in-ring commentary about
everybody
that card.
giving me crap about the previous year's card being so terrible. I
What was
was like, well, fine, I'm going to make something ridiculously busted.
What was the previous year's card?
What was it, Champion Aura?
Champion
Aura,
Aura.
yeah.
Champion.
Yeah, Champion Aura. That was like the look at the top 5 and draw 2 or whatever. And a lot of people thought that card was really bad.
Yeah, that's what I got for winning nationals. You should have given me an Ultimate Champion. It should have been Joshua Morris and Dustin Morabito only.
The initial championship cards that we had, like the Champions Drill and whatnot, those were initially intended to only go to those people. It wasn't until later that we found out that they would be passed out a lot more. And then we had the Android Saga misprint fiasco, or miscut fiasco, I should say, where all those promos leaked in the Android Saga packs, and that kind of opened up the floodgates. Well, we were finally able to start clamping it around at that time. So, like, I've got a shredded Ultimate Champion sitting in the other room. Kind of came by, I was like, no, we can't let a physical one of these. Around the same time, they also came through and like hole punched a bunch of our cards too. So some of the stuff that I've still got, you've got this big glaring hole,
Yeah.
like my dark ones.
I have holes in mine, and then I wear them on. I remember I wore them all on a chain on my neck for a long time.
I had one with a hole punched in it.
Krillin's Power Cat, I also have a lot of fondness for, because that was technically my very first card that I made with Josh Minnan and Josh McManus.
The card with like a 2-page errata on it.
Where it's like each new drill.
Dragon Balls.
It was supposed to be a simple concept, you know, just you get to use this and you get to copy a drill for the rest of combat. But you'd be surprised how complex some very simple ideas can end up being.
Well, at least it was a card that was being heavily played. Some of my experiences when I was in design roles was you'd get these page-long manifesto questions about cards that no one ever played.
That card didn't receive much play until towards the end of regular Z. I think when that Orange Vegeta's Assault OVA came out, then Krillin's Power Cat finally saw some play because he used it with a combo with like Orange Joint for straight drill.
I remember using it on Orange Focusing Drill, so, you know, if you have your
Really?
board set up.
Well, then I'm totally fucking wrong.
Yeah, you are. Get it together.
I don't remember really seeing much play until people started playing that deck.
You're right, that deck was a staple in that deck.
Yeah. Were you the designer of Piccolo Multiform? There's a chat question.
The one that you're getting to play
Your physicals
your
twice.
attacks twice. Yes, yes, that's my baby.
That sounds like a Chippy card.
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna pivot.
I can't take credit for all the super crazy cards, but a decent amount of them are mine, especially towards the back end.
Yeah, because the Namekian Strike was one of the Joshes, I believe, right?
Yeah, and that one of those wasn't ever actually supposed to be made. Actually, I think making strike itself. But there was an issue with Excel spreadsheets getting swapped, and one of the older Excel spreadsheets got sent to the printer, and that's how it got out. Because there were other versions of it that we ended up, well, we'd rather have these, and we ended up like releasing the other versions of it and also to make it strike. So
that sounds
yeah,
about right.
In Trunk Saga, when we did the big Trunk Saga revamp, where we made the rules sane, in the game to the 9th second.
Can you touch on that for just a bit? Because the game played pretty different before
Yeah.
Trunk Saga.
So the original version of the game, Insane Saga, the rules were very loose. You could play most of the game outside of combat. So, like the initial deck in the game, Gohan Anger Ball, played the game mostly outside of combat. The only thing it went into combat for was to end it, and it literally won in like 90 seconds. And the only deck that could take it on was when Frieza Saga came out, and there was a Go-Go one-hit KO deck where literally you just tried to enter first turn and hope they didn't have a way to end combat and kill him in one turn, because he started at the very top power level bracket. Because when Jim made the initial power rating chart, he only did it for Saiyan Saga numbers. He didn't do it for Frieza Saga numbers. So when Goldo and Nail got made, they were completely off the chart.
Yeah, they were the top in Dodoria also.
So at the time, the company was being run by or our division was being run by a guy named Gary Mabra, father of Garrett Mabra, one of the eventual graphic designers that worked on some of the cards. And he was a good guy. He was a good guy, but he didn't have a whole lot of knowledge of trading card games or how our world should work. So eventually he left and was replaced by Chaz Elliot. Chaz Elliot had worked at Wizards of the Coast. He's one of the people that is a part of the group that is responsible for all the Weatherlight stuff and Magic the Gathering, all that branding and all those changes around that time. He was a very integral figure of that. And he saw the state of the game and just how terrible it was. It was like, well, if there's any chance for us to have more than one additional set, we need to fix this game. So he swung for the fences, put a pause on it. I got promoted to lead game developer, and we just went to town on trying to fix the game up as much as possible. Primarily, there were three of us. I had the lead, so I got to make a majority of the decisions, but as far as creative input, Joshua Minnan and Josh McManus had a large part in Trunk Saga as well. I believe Joshua Minnan did Namekian in red. McManus did Saiyan and blue, and I think I did the other two.
Awesome.
Orange for sure, because I definitely undershot the mark for power.
Yeah.
On that first mastery. But and then in Android Saga, because they were both promoted to other roles, so once we were back into the groove of, hey, we've got to get a set out in X amount of time and whatnot, they were too busy in their roles. So for Android Saga, we hired someone, Israel, everybody knows as IQ, to be our playtester and basically help me do a lot of the development and playtesting work in Android Saga. And that's how IQ got hired onto the team and got his start at Score.
Okay.
And we would still like open up and be like, hey, you want to make 10 cards for this color, you want to make 10 cards for this or that. and they'd make their initial ideas and designs, but once they were handed over, it was free reign to do with whatever.
Awesome. Okay, so we're gonna move from Z for a little bit here, and we're gonna talk about Yu Hakusho, which is a property that a lot of people seem to like. There's a resurgence in love for Yu the property in general, and there's a lot of people coming back to the game, and I think there's even people discovering the game for the first time now. And I know that was your thing. Like that engine is super unique. So tell us about like what went into making that game engine.
Yeah, I love that engine.
Yeah, so that actually wasn't the very first version of the game. So when we first got the property from Funimation, they really wanted us to take care of it because we were doing, in their eyes, a really good job with Dragon Ball Z. To the point that, like in the beginning, every time we'd have various different power ratings on characters, we'd have to send little emails like justifying why such and such is such a number. And, after a certain point, they were just like, we trust you, do whatever you want. So they gave us the property. The initial version of the Yu Hakusho game engine was actually a variant of Dragon Ball Z. But it had way too many resources. And while there was one idea in it that I think would be really cool, in the end it was just kind of too much. And also just kind of trying to mimic Dragon Ball Z a little bit. This was the first time, unlike Dragon Ball Z and Buffy, where I was basically given somebody else's game engine and had to mold it and develop off of it. Yu Hakusho was going to be my very first one. So I definitely didn't want it to be a Magic Club. So the Pokemon trading card game was a very big influence to me as far as a gamer. I played the crap out of that game. And it is very not Magic.
You're a legend in that game, man.
I tried to use it a little bit as an inspiration. Now, when the original version of the Yu Hakusho game got shut, I think I was going through my second watch through of Yu Hakusho, my second binge of the entire series. And in the show twice, tournaments are a very big deal.
Mm-hmm.
They have that one demon tournament and then the demon team tournament there at the very end. So I really wanted to try to do something that was mimicking that common trope that was in a lot of anime shows, where you had your team of like 4 or 5 people, and normally it would be this 5, maybe something in the storyline happened, and you had this guest character on your team instead. That's why there's that mechanic of the 5th slot not starting filled, so you could try to change it during the game if you wanted. I was very much onto cards as a resource. It was something that one of the mechanics I clung on to for a lot of the games that I designed. Instead of having like lands to tap or an escalating mana resource, or make a decision: do I want to use this for its effect, or do I want to use this as fuel for something else?
So like paying for the attack powers.
Yeah. It also helps with opportunity costs, because then that encourages people to play more high-risk, high-reward cards, because if they end up in a matchup where that card's, garbage, they can just pitch it to an attack. So, but if your hand's all good stuff, then it really puts you in a decision on which cards do I want to keep and use for what they do, and which cards do I want to use to deal attacks.
Okay. So you had a little bit of show and tell there earlier. Do you want to
show
your stuff?
I do have various different printouts of various different cards that went through a lot of different designs at Score that I had hidden away. As far as Yu Hakusho, I've kind of got, I think I posted this in Retro once, but I have some of the original playtest cards that we kind of used. Carl threw together this template. I grabbed a couple of images from the show and from their style guide, and it kind of shows you a little bit of kind of where we were going with some of the ideas. For example, up here you see this weird like hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically 2 rows and 3 columns. that was the relative position movement system. And the idea was is you actually had your main character in play, and based off of if your cards were close to each other, far away from each other, or whatnot, you know, you could use different cards. And your main character card would basically physically move around to more mimic like an actual anime battle where you're like punching someone and then uppercutting them into the air, then, you know, jumping up after them like Marvel NBC2 and kicking them around and crap. So that's where some of this stuff comes from. But it ended up being a pretty not good game. Every turd's not golden. And so you got to learn to let go of some of ideas. And so I had to let go of that one, but it ended up being for the better because I really liked the engine that ended up coming out for you. I just wish that I got to develop on it.
Yeah, you were moved back off of it. I remember that.
Yeah, when funny enough, when Dragon Ball Z ended, we also had the big shift with Chaz Elliott leaving and the big stuff with Bill Gully. And while at first he made it sound like I was going to get to decide if I was going to get to stay on Dragon Ball Z or stick with Yu and IQ would get the other. He laid down the commandment the next day that no, you're our Dragon Ball guy, so you're going to do Dragon Ball GT while IQ picks up Yu Hakusho. And so he picked up my game from set 2 on, set 2 through 6.
All right. Well, let's go back to the main topic here. Let's go talk about Z to GT. What do you remember about that process? And kind of, Ake and I touched on it a little bit in his interview, and Ake, Ake was kind of like, it could have been handled better, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's the way it is. Without going into super details and names and stuff, like what is your whole take on that?
I think that it was not handled well, and basically set us up for the downhill that we had shortly after. Because before and after Chaz Elliott, we never really had somebody in charge of our division that understood the hobby gaming world as far as trading card games. When Chaz joined, he spent a very considerable amount of time teaching the CEO of the company how different the trading card game world is from sports cards. So when that CEO left and got replaced by Mr. Gully, all that institutional knowledge that Chaz built up disappeared. And he tried to teach that again to Mr. Gully. And Gully was very stubborn and did not like being taught anything. So they clashed a lot. And one day Chaz saw his job position up on our website in the job section. And that pissed him off. As probably would anybody that would see their job up on the company website. So they had a very loud discussion, and he left. And all that knowledge for how the hobby gaming world left, and got replaced with a lot of sports stuff. And while the collectability aspects of the sports stuff was good, the other stuff was kind of
extreme error.
Destroying things. Like, hey, let's make 4 or 5 games at the same time. Throw them at the oven.
Looks like we're still alive.
It might be yours.
Okay.
We're trying to determine if we're still live or not because our feed went down on one of the monitors. But no one's complaining in chat.
Mine's good.
Okay. So we must do.
Yeah, it really wasn't handled well, and Dolly was definitely one of those stubborn, I know it all people. So that kind of brought about the drastic changes, because he was very much one of those people that brand extensions don't work.
They're real big on it, like it had to be a new game. It couldn't just be a continuation. The rule, like mechanically, has to be different.
So when Chaz left, that was kind of his commandment. Dragon Ball GT was it had to be new, but it had to still be completely playable with all the old cards. Gully also saw kind of the influence that IQ and I had with a lot of our player base. And he wanted to make sure that we had someone that would manage us well. So they hired someone by the name of Dan Tibbles. And his job literally was to be our manager. That was it.
I remember Mr. Tibbles.
I know him by reputation only.
Yeah, he's an interesting person. But you know, him being fresh and new, you know, he was going straight to Gully with everything. Not necessarily in a tattletale way, but I want to make sure whatever you're wanting is 100% up and up what's happening here. So when I tried to pass the original version of the Dragon Ball GT, which was Dragon Ball Z, but just cleaned up the rules and whatnot, took away some of the extraneous crap that didn't need to be there and whatnot, that wasn't enough. That was basically the same game. That didn't pass the Tibbles test. So we had to come up with something very different. The original version of Dragon Ball GT, I tried to come up with a kind of a simultaneous turn version of the game, but it is possibly one of the worst trading card games I've ever made.
I think, I want to say we played that for a day or something.
Yeah, a day. It was absolute crap. So I went back to the drawing board. I mean, it wasn't the first time that it had been asked of me, but the whole, you got to make a new game, but it's got to be completely compatible with existing cards. It was a really difficult freaking thing to do. So I went back to the drawing board, tried to think of, you know, what could I really change about the Z engine while still keeping it Z? Because I felt like I needed to keep the core Z engine intact if the old cards were going to work with the game. And that's when I came up with the Android 18 rule, looking at the top 6.
Which I personally liked. I think I'm the only one.
I liked it on offense. I don't like it on defense. Sitting there and taking all the time with your non-combat step and then declaring and then having to stop for a minute as your opponent is now looking at the top 6 and choosing his 3 really destroys the pacing of the game and gives them too much of a defensive advantage.
I'm a defensive player.
Well, true. If you're a defensive player, you gotta fucking love it. But that's also where we came up with the idea of like increasing the numbers, because you know in Dragon Ball GT they're like chucking around 1,000 times Kamehamehas and crap.
Yeah, you basically power creep the entire game through stats.
Kinda, sorta. It's all smoke and mirrors. Because the game was designed around an average of 1 endurance per card in your deck.
That all worked.
All the life card numbers were double.
Yeah, that all worked in like standard focus GT, but the numbering didn't work quite the same when you mixed the cards.
Well, that was kind of the idea with the combined environment in making the newer cards somewhat more viable without trying to super power creep the actual effects. Hey, do you want to use the super powerful effects from the old game but they're not doing a whole lot of damage, or do you want to use these, you know, big fat attacks from the new game but they may not necessarily have, you know, connecting strike quality of effects, even though a few of them ended up.
Yeah, because I like GT when it's just
that
GT.
Was the idea behind it.
Yeah, because I was a playtester through all that GT stuff, and I like GT just when it was GT. Because I remember we tried to test like expanded, and after like a day, the stance by the company was like, that's going to be the players. The players will have to kind of like help us with that because we're just not equipped to do that with our limited staff. And at that point, we had moved into Yu Hakusho, and we were about to go into Inuyasha, and I want to say Case Close was in the works, and then
Dragon Booster?
Dragon Booster was there, as well.
Dragon Booster was there down the line.
Yeah, I think that was farther after that, though.
Sonic X.
No, that was farther.
That's
too.
why I
forgot
was
about
pulled
Sonic
off
X.
of Dragon Ball GT. I did the first 3 sets, Fady, Super 17, and Shadow Dragon, and then they wanted their lead designer to work on the hot new Dragon Booster property that was going to be on ABC and backed by Disney. So they pulled me off of Dragon Ball GT to work on that, and had Ake pick up the reins. And that's how the torch was passed off to him.
Yeah. So
We didn't realize at the time that the ABC that the show was being made for was ABC Family, whose top-rated show was a Full House rerun.
yeah, I remember those guys. Those guys were very good business, like not business sales. They were very good salespeople. They knew all the correct buzzwords.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
What was their company's name? I think it was like Story Hat Games or whatever.
Yeah,
But
you remember the guy said he worked on Batman?
Robin, whoever.
Yeah.
They're brilliant marketing people.
Yeah, 'cause he
they
said he-
said all the right words. We weren't the only ones sold on Dragon Booster.
Yeah, the Jack
Everybody was
Pacific of the
sold on
toys,
this show.
the video game. McDonald's had the Happy Meal. I just remember they told me they worked on Batman. Like, oh, we worked on Batman, and we used the Batmobile and the Val Kilmer props and all that stuff. And I was like, oh, they must have worked on Batman forever. And then I found out that no, they worked on the OnStar commercial that had the Batmobile in it.
Oh yeah, ABC and Disney, not ABC Family and Disney's Jetix block.
Jetix, that's what it was. It was the Jetix block. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna have
Got that
Brian.
secret in my head.
I'm gonna have Brian pull up a picture here real quick.
What?
The picture from the old apartment back in the day.
Oh.
We're gonna take a flashback through time here to when this would have been the heyday of GT, when you were at your design height, and I was a young, fresh playtester in my very hot topic goth days.
Oh yeah, our big goth emo kick.
Yeah, I believe that was Mr. Cole Huddle's apartment. As you can see, there's no furniture, 2 Dragon Ball statues on there, and a set of samurai size.
Hey, more furniture meant less cardboard, you know.
Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about the graphical look of GT. Speaking of all the, as you can see, we're all decked out in black there in our outfits. So let's pull up one of the Dragon Ball GT attack cards or something, or one of the masteries, and let's just talk about the graphical change, because it was a very drastic graphical change.
There was.
From what the original game was.
We don't want brand extensions and whatnot. They really tried to go with a very different look. And they actually had 2 different designers work on the graphics for it. Carl Braun, who was the main person behind all the templates from Sane Saga on, and a man by the name of Todd Cowden, who worked on a lot of our website stuff, but is very artistically inclined. He's really good.
Yeah.
So like there was even like an inner office competition where like Carl had like 5 of them and Todd had 3, and everybody in the company came around and were like voting on which ones they liked and whatnot. But at the end, the template that won kind of got the victory points because, you know, we're all wearing black.
Well, I remember these
black at the time was seen as a very gamer color.
Yeah, I remember these conversations because they came and asked us in the playtesting department. That was the first time I can remember they came and asked our opinion, really about anything when it came to the way the cards looked. And I remember we all went nuts for them, and we loved these card templates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and plus the black text box with the white text worked out well because it bled into the borders easily, which gave it a very striking look, and the text popped out more and is a lot easier to read than black text on insert color gradient in the background. But there were a lot of them. I've got a couple of like some of the other ideas that didn't quite make it.
Do you have those with you, or are they're buried in your house somewhere?
I've got them with me.
Okay, we're going to talk about one thing real quick, and then we'll look at those. This was a pretty unique idea. On the screen here is the high text with like the fill in your own blank stuff.
Oh yeah, Yeah, one of the things that made Score stick out as far as our collectability were those high-tech cards. Even if you didn't necessarily know how to play the game, like those cards really stuck out and caught people's eyes. So the company was very big on always having, I think they called them lenticulars.
Yeah, the foil, the hologram things.
Yeah, as kind of a big show-off thing to attract people to our product. At the time, we started exploring printing on plastic, and they really wanted some type of mechanic where the plastic see-throughness could work out well. And that's where the idea of the packer concept came about, where you had personality levels that were missing stuff, and you could put whichever card you want behind it to kind of like modify and customize the levels as you would like.
That's pretty cool. Well, let's take a look at some of your early drafts, because I'm sure I saw these, and I honestly can't remember what they look like. So I'm excited to see these.
Here's one idea for like how some of the cards were going to come out. This was one of the designs. I don't remember whose cards are which between Carl and Todd. I know that Carl made a lot more than Todd did.
That one's not doing it for me.
Yeah, that's part of the brainstorming process.
Well, that one,
you explore ideas, even if they end up being crap.
Yeah, well,
you never know if there's something about them that you like and end up using in the final.
So, like, those two Gokus were on, like, a Dragon Ball Z preview card or whatever.
Yeah, that's... Well, the preview cards in the Kid Buu saga were some of the initial ideas, but they wanted to go a lot farther than
yeah, that's
than
pretty
what we
good.
ended up with. But yeah, I mean, this would be part of the standard process. Like, I think this one ended up being like one of the preview images.
That was too, yeah. That was too.
We also went through and made a white plate for it as well.
Almost looks like a bleach card.
It does. Well, I can tell you right now, that's Carl Braun's work right there.
Yeah.
So so like when Carl and I would do stuff for Inuyasha, we'd do a similar thing. We'd end up with like 12 templates and choose the one we like. And then, you always keep it in the back of your mind, and something come up 4 or 5 sets later. It's like, we need a cool promo. It's like, we'll use that one that we didn't use from like 4 sets ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for people that don't know, foil cards, how they're made, like you have the foil stock, and then when you print your ink on top of it, the foil goes through, and that's what gives you the foil effect. And then when you have parts of a card you don't want foil to go through, you add an additional plate, a plate of opaque white, and that you paint that down on where you don't want the foil to go through. That's the stuff that you're washing off with like the acetate or whatever when you're making foil proxies or whatnot. And so that's kind of the idea behind this one side image. The black stuff is where the foil is supposed to be coming through, and the white is the opaque white that's actually blocking the foil. So a lot of times when we would have cards and they'd come through this process for us to approve them, we would be seeing the white plate for them as well. And that's where a few of our foiling mistakes would come from, because it's very unintuitive. You think the black blocks and the white is the foil, and so sometimes we got it backwards.
Okay. Well, we're here real quick. We're going to take a pause, and I'm going to have another piece of show and tell here that I dug out of my storage unit. And there's something of infamy in here that I want you to explain, because I honestly don't remember, and I don't honestly think, because I never play tested this card. So I honestly don't remember what these things do, and I'm going to see if you can remember what they are.
I want to say, didn't that card go like infinite with itself?
Yeah, I think the card did go infinite. For anybody who can't see, I've got a copy of Old School Beatdown here. Brian's going to put it up on the screen, and I want to see if you can remember what all these things do on this card.
I can't see his screen. Let me pull off the image real quick.
So we have it on our screen.
I bet I could. So the idea behind that, so a lot of our side products, like the blister packs and the Tactical Power packs, a majority of those were us trying to find ways to get rid of say inside product. because the company printed millions of it, thinking it was going to be the next Pokemon. And it didn't. But we'd always still try to make these packages enticing to people, even if besides just the Saiyan Saga packs. And so we'd create like custom cards, and a lot of them would be pretty good and whatnot. And I kind of remember this card now that I'm seeing its text, because I kind of got a little mad. I turned over some promos, and I didn't necessarily want the promos to be super strong or whatnot. And they were like, you know, Tibbles was in charge, and Tibbles was like, hey, these cards are crap. And so, you know, diva little me, I just went completely in the opposite direction. So the concept behind this card was to try to fit as many DBZ card mechanics on it as possible.
Can you actually explain, do you know what they all do? Because I'm looking at it now and I'm like, I think this is the first time I've ever noticed that it's a combat card.
Expanded only meant that it was only for the expanded environment. Sensei deck only, there's the side Sensei deck, our version of sideboards. And that meant that the card had to start from there. Focused means that it couldn't be blocked by omni-blocks, stuff that blocks both physical and energies. And defense shields, which were drills that gave you free blocks. Masked was a mechanic that I added in Shadow Dragon Saga. I got on a look. One of the things I really liked from Yu-Gi-Oh! Was the whole trap card thing. The whole, hey, you know your opponent's playing something, but you don't quite know what it is. So you have to work off of partial knowledge. And I was really obsessed with kind of trying to find a way to use that idea. And that's the idea behind masked attacks, is you're supposed to play it, and it's played upside down. So they know that they're getting an energy attack to the face, but they have to decide if they want to block it before knowing what it actually is or not. To try to let players like bluff, you know, try to use different tricks, whatnot, or it more put the mental weight on the blocking decision more on the defending player's side. But it didn't work out that well. Empower 3 was a mechanic. Is that Cell Games or World Games? Basically,
it's Cell Games.
Yeah, it is Cell Games, yeah.
Yeah, basically, if you choose to empower your attack, it does extra damage equal to the number behind it. So on Old School Beatdown, Empower 3 is +3 life cards. And if you did that, you ignore everything else behind it on the card. So everything else you would ignore except for the 3 part. And that was to try to give players another decision to make. You know, hey, do I want to go with the stronger attack, or do I want to go with the weaker version of this attack with all these extra attacks? Rename 1 is the name replacement for keep the attack on the table to be used one more time this combat, or a second time this combat. Shift the card that's an ultra rare. I think that was the Saiyan mechanic from Shadow Dragon, where you discarded a card from your hand to search your life deck for a card that fit its requirement. So this card, you would search your deck for an ultra rare and put it in your hand. Augment, you would choose one of your cards in play that fit the criteria, and you would play a copy of it from your discard pile. So augment the card that has a DBZ card back. It had to have one of the old Dragon Ball Z card backs, because one of the IP snafus was we couldn't use the old Z card back because it's Dragon Ball GT. We had to use Dragon Ball GT card back, and that's even why we put, like, I think we put sleeves in some of our starters for players for them to mix things.
Oh no, the reason there had to be sleeves in the starters was because all the Broly subset cards had Z backs in the first set of GT.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So like in the pre-release kits, there were sleeves in the pre-release kits because of that.
And then, so yeah, you basically choose a DBZ card and play a copy of it from your discard pile. Train an ability. Oh,
that's the only one I don't know.
This was the Shadow Dragon orange mechanic. where so you would have cards that would be tagged with the keyword ability, and when you trained an ability, if I remember correctly, you like searched your deck for a card that was an ability, and you stuck it under your mastery, and then you got the card next turn. So the idea was kind of like a delayed card advantage. I would be setting up a future turn's hand card advantage, but with a explicit set of cards instead of any card. If I'm remembering that correct. I kind of went crazy with Shadow Dragon. If you declared Tokuwaza, raise your anger 2 levels. Basically, if you played with the mastery card, you chose one fighting style to keep with. Anger was the XP mechanic, where people use gain levels. And then discard any cards in any player's sensei deck. Basically, you could go through our sideboards and Tokuro, because they weren't just sideboards in our game. We had various different effects that may interact with them in a variety of different ways.
You can roll it off. Yeah, so that's one hell of a card there, Chippy.
I think I might have been able to fit 1 or 2 mechanics onto it.
I think that is that has to be one of the most complicated cards ever created in a card game.
Like, I have several questions that are not worth getting into about that card.
So, after
now, to be honest, I really wasn't putting a whole lot of thought beyond how many mechanics can I fit on the one card? How many different effects that do a variety of different things can I get to fit?
Well, that's pretty impressive. So we're getting close to the end of our time here, but there is a chat question that I think we might go over a few minutes to talk about here. And I've learned about this because it's been brought up a lot lately in the player community, but there seems to be a lot of love and affection for epic battles. And I know originally Epic Battles was one of my projects because I had to go to Blockbuster and deal with all those people, and they didn't want us to be able to sell it in hobby stores. It had to be sold only in Blockbusters. They wanted us to run all the tournaments inside of Blockbusters. They only wanted to sell like 5 starter decks and 10 booster packs, a Blockbuster. And at that point, Inuyasha was really kicking, and they had me on Inuyasha, Epic Battles, and Case Closed. And I kind of was like, this. I don't have time to deal with all the Blockbuster stuff. So I think Epic Battles went your direction, because the original version I had of it was just a reskinned kind of Dragon Ball thing, and you kind of took that to the next level. And a lot of people really like those mechanics that you did for Epic Battles because they're very indicative of like the fighting game IPs that they were tracing.
Yeah, it was kind of made engine-wise is kind of the other side of the coin to ReZ. Because ReZ was very resource-intensive. It's all about being the most efficient and all that stuff. So Epic Battles is more tried to be designed more to be freewheeling and more about what the cards did more than who could play the most efficiently. So we tried having a mechanic there for a while where like every card you could also use the block. Not necessarily like refocusing like in ReZ, but actual like a second half of the card. Because you can always hold the block button down or hold back in a video game to block. But we ended up not going with that. But the design of the game would have been really different if I would have better understood what was happening with Blockbuster. Because the whole reason we had to go through Blockbuster was UFS already had the rights for Street Fighter in the Hobby Channel.
Well, that's part of it because we had Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, we got Mortal Kombat for the Hobby Channel, but we couldn't get
Street Fighter in the Hobby.
But they were able to like weasel the license.
Because you had to buy Street Fighter at Blockbuster.
Yeah.
And they didn't. I didn't know about the Street Fighter thing until like the sets were getting ready to launch. That the Street Fighter part of the game was not even going to be able to be sold in hobby channels.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff, especially the whole, well, we're only going to have 5 starter decks and 5 booster packs per store. That shocked me. That I did not know about that until towards the end. How the game was designed was I basically made one mega set, and then I divvied up that mega set amongst Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. So they're actually designed as one full game. They weren't ever actually designed to be played on their own, like only the Mortal Kombat cards or only the Street Fighter cards. But when the game was released, tons of Mortal Kombat product was out there and very little Street Fighter.
Yeah, so I didn't know this, and the chat is telling me that there's actually a Reddit group for Epic Battles where they continue the game making their own fan cards.
No way. I know what I'm doing tonight.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I really that's cool. Epic Battles was a very fun game. I tried to make it more like fast food BBG, I guess would be the best way to put it.
Yeah.
You know, flashy, wow, cool looking cards. Getting to design the images for the cards for Mortal Kombat was particularly fun.
Yeah, you got to write all the card descriptions.
Yeah, all the Street Fighter artwork was like lifted from the Street Fighter Combat and their style guides.
No,
but all the Mortal Kombat
yes.
work, we got them to actually draw.
It was done. The Street Fighter was done by Cold Fusion. No, the Mortal Kombat was done by Cold Fusion.
Yeah,
And
Udon,
because we got to use the style guide for Street Fighter and then the comic book, and Udon was doing the comic books. So a lot of the MPs and stuff like that were commissioned by Udon. And then I think Cold Fusion did the Tekken set that came out, because the next set was Tekken, and I believe Ake designed the Tekken set.
Ake and Kunk.
Ake and Kunk, yeah.
Kunk, yeah, because I left after, or in the middle of set 2's development for Epic Battles.
So just in a timeline mind, did you work on Epic Battles and Dragon Booster at the same time? Or was Dragon Booster already done and gone by the time you were on to Epic Battles?
I think Dragon Booster first set was done and handed off, and that's when I got pulled over, I think. Because I do know it was in parallel to Reezy. I do know that it was in parallel to Reezy. I think Dragon Booster had just finished. I'm not quite sure.
So I know the
Dragon
second
Booster was a huge letdown.
yeah, I know the second set of Dragon Booster was like done all the way to the card files were ready to go to the printing press, but I don't think it ever went to the printing press. Because I remember I even got Dragon Booster cards like routed onto my desk at the time to look at.
The company destroyed its credibility. Nobody even really knew what the show was. So
They didn't even finish animating most of it because we had scripts for.
Oh no, they did.
Did they?
Dude, you'll find it online. They got up to 3 seasons.
Oh, that's unbelievable.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, I thought it got released on like YouTube or something, like official.
Yeah, I don't know where. I think I saw like an episode of season 3 once on YouTube randomly, and I was
Okay.
like, "This is wow! They actually made it this far."
Okay. So we're going to have to wrap it up here, Chippy, because we're going to roll into the marketing pre-recorded panel that I did the other night. So do you have any closing comments about your time at Score, and do you have anything you want to say to the fans? Because it seems like a lot of the stuff that you worked on is some of the stuff that people really resonate and enjoy the most now, well into adulthood.
Well, it's really cool seeing stuff that I poured blood, sweat, and tears into still having an effect on people's lives so many years afterwards. I know it's because there's a Goku or a Trunks or a Vegeta on the card, but still seeing some of the old cards sell for as much as they do, like, oh wow, that's awesome. but at the end of the day, above all that, I miss the people most. You know, even the ones I argued with in the office a lot. The people were really what made that place special. So it's always fun to catch up with them down the road. But it's also really neat to kind of just see some of the games that I worked on just kind of take a life of their own. You know, the torch being passed on. You know, seeing Panini bring back Dragon Ball Z, and then seeing the game continue to live on with fans, and seeing what all the designers are doing. And they're doing a fantastic job, by the way. Couldn't ask for better. It's just really awesome. So.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think unless Josh had any closing comments here.
No, just to quote the great Michael Scott, like, you know, and if only there was a way to know that you were in the good old days before you left them.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about Score as well.
Yeah, and I'm just going to do another reminder that if anybody wishes to donate towards the suicide prevention and awareness cause, they can go to the Hunter Burton site and put in a donation if they would like, because that's really what this stream was about tonight, and then us kind of getting to celebrate the life of one of our favorite players in the community who loved all these games.
Yeah, the Hunter Burton group's done a lot of really good, awesome stuff over these couple of years with the Memorial Open. So definitely support them. They're a good cause.
When are we coming back live?
The next live will be about 9 o'clock, I think. I think this next segment runs about an hour and 10 minutes. So I would say like 9:10 is when we're going to have Joey DiCarlo on for our next live segment. Mm-hmm. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Chippy. When I get back into Dallas and the world is not nuts, we will get together.
Yes, definitely. Once all this COVID silliness is passed.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Hope everybody enjoyed that video. I really enjoyed talking with Chippy. He's one of the first friends I made when I moved to Dallas and started working at Score, and he and I have made really good friends since then. I'm going to put links below to the Anthology series that we referenced early on in the video. Unfortunately, only Part 1, Part 2, and Part 4 of the series still exists. We lost Part 3 when we had a major website crash, I think in late 2009. I'm not exactly sure. But if it ever resurfaces, I'll be sure to put it on there. I'm also going to get with him at some point about getting some scans of the prototypes of the GT cards and the Yu Hakusho cards that he had on the stream. That way they can be archived. I know a lot of people are interested